So, welcome back. And the module we're going to jump into today is regarding planning your week and planning your day in an effort, not only to help you grow your business, organize things, but in order to hit your pillars. And when it comes to planning your week and planning your day, I mean, I refer to this as broccoli. And what I mean by that is, we've been hearing our entire lives that vegetables are good for us, right? We've been hearing that, eat your vegetables and this will happen and you'll get your vitamins and it'll help you get more fiber and it's good for disease and all that kind of stuff. And the evidence just keeps mounting up. But just because you've heard it over and over and over, and at this point it's probably white noise to most people, it doesn't mean if you started eating a lot more vegetables in your diet that it wouldn't help in those areas, right? And so I look at planning your week and planning your day very much in the same vein in that, look, we've been hearing our whole professional lives that, especially when it comes to like planning your day, don't start your day till it's finished on paper and, all sorts of things like that. But most of us at this point, it's just white noise. And so to me, though, it's actually an open secret of success. I mean, I'll say it's probably been about 7 years since I started consistently planning my day, religiously planning my day and planning my week. And I can't, I think back sometimes and I go, how in the world did I function without this? In other words, without being strategic, without getting clear about what I needed to accomplish and what were the most important things. And so I can obviously never go back to the old way. And, having worked with a ton of clients and people from different industries, I can count on one hand the number of people I've worked with who actually do this consistently. And so to me, it's low hanging fruit, right? In terms of hitting your pillars and being more successful, if you adapt this habit and use the system I'm about to tell you, or part of the system, it doesn't matter. There's lots of systems out there. But I think you're gonna see big results and hopefully get to the point that I'm talking about where you just can never see yourself winging it again. You can never see yourself just go, go, go and without actually thinking it through. So, the pillars in focus management, I mean, they're all about being strategic, right? They're all about thinking through the best place to spend your mental energy and your resources and planning your week and your day, it's just a microcosm of that. And, one of my favorite sayings is action drives out thought. And I heard it through a gentleman by the name of Richard Koch, who claims he heard it from his boss of Bain Capital, Bill Bain. So it goes back quite a way, but the best way I've ever heard it explained is by Perry Marshall. And so I want to kind of just read you this quote or this little segment here, and I think you're going to realize what I'm getting at. This idea of being strategic and thinking things through and just how powerful it is. So here's the way Perry Marshall articulates this. One of my favorite quotes from Richard Koch is, action drives out thought. Write that down on a Post-it and pin it to your monitor. If you spend all your time doing and not enough time thinking, guess what happens? You create more work for yourself. And you have even less time to think. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? You see, most of us think if I work hard enough and fast enough and get all my tasks completed, then I'll have time to think and plan and create and generate ideas. Nope, doesn't work that way. You must carve out time to think, plan, and create, or it will never happen. And I'll add something to that, and that is, and I think I heard this from Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach, is that, strategy doesn't take time, it makes time. And so even when you're thinking about planning your week or planning your day as additional time, what I can tell you without a doubt is you will actually save yourself a ton of time and save yourself a lot of work if you think of it more as an investment, right? Again, strategy doesn't take time, it makes time. So under this kind of, spirit here, and hopefully I'm convincing enough because I would love for you to experience what I've gotten to experience over the last 7 years of doing this. I'm going to run through my system here of planning my week and planning my day. And again, take part of it, take all of it, but plan it in some way. All right, so let's start with planning your week. Okay, so as you know from my book and from everything, I obviously use the index card, and it's what a lot of my clients use. This happens to be an 8x5 index card. It's an oversized index card because I use it for more than just my pillars. I use it for planning my week. And so I want to kind of walk you through what you're looking at here. This is a real picture of my current weekly card. I took this picture on a Sunday evening when I was actually planning my week. And look, you can plan your week the Friday before. You can plan it on a Sunday night. You can plan it on Monday morning. You just got to make sure you do it before things get started. And so if you look at the right column, all right, the right column is my to-do list. It is my ongoing, both personal and professional to-do list. And I guess some of you looking at this or you're looking at this maybe going, wait a second, that's your entire to-do list? Mine would be 14 pages. And the reason it's not, and there's another module in this series on reference documents, but the reason it's not is because of my use of reference documents. And so if you're looking here at the right column, and for example, you see Phoenix, right? 9/1, Phoenix. Well, for the event I have to do in Phoenix, which requires a number of things, it requires putting together, travel plans and hotel and all kind of the logistics of it, getting the agreement signed. I have a tab, okay, in my reference documents. I have an Excel sheet literally titled events. All right, and that's something you'll see if you hear the other modules. You'll see it's titled events, and that has kind of my to-do list, what still has to be done for each of those events. And then I also have another reference document for the actual presentation and slideshow. In this case, I like to use the PowerPoint itself to keep all my notes and to build the slideshow. So when I say Phoenix as a single line item to do, there's a lot of little to-dos in there, right? But I keep those on reference documents. So, and I do that for a lot of these. So that's the reason this list maybe looks short to a lot of you. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that some things are in yellow, some things are in orange. If something is in orange, what that simply means is I have to do that task before the end of the week. It doesn't have to be done by a certain day or by a certain time. It just has to be done by the end of the week or there's a consequence. In the case here, it says canceled gym, right? What I actually have, I have canceled gym ? Is I believe if I don't cancel my gym membership, I'm actually changing something with my workout. If I don't cancel it by the end of the week, it auto renews. So I want to check on that. So there's a consequence for not getting that done by the end of the week. If something is in yellow, what that means is it has a due date, meaning this has to be done by a certain date or there's a consequence. So I have to prep for some interviews that I'm doing by August 7th. I have a bunch of events that I have on the second line there. I have to make sure everything's done for them, both presentation-wise and slides by, August 7th, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things on my to-do list that have a time, right? So yellow is time. Orange just means has to be done by the end of the week. Now, I'm going to skip the middle column for a second. We're going to do that one last. Let's jump over to the left column. So the left column is my pillar column, but it's also really what I call it is my proactive column because I both list my pillars for the week, but then also any proactive things that I have to do that week. So for example, I start off up top, it says 50/50-product. Those are my directional goals, which are talked about in a different module. Those are my directional goals, and that's just my thing. I like to keep my directional goals in front of me so I see what I'm working toward with my pillars. Then I have at the current time, I have 3 pillars. I've had, 6, 7 at certain points in being an entrepreneur. Right now I happen to have 3, all right? My first one is 2 hours of prospecting and messaging. Second one is 4 hours of working on my product, this being a part of my product. And then my follow-up pillar that keeps me in front of my potential clients, potential engagements, things like that. That's my Excel follow pillar. So I have those three pillars, and I discuss those more in a different module. But those are my three pillars, and those are all in orange because they're my pillars. They have to be done by the end of the week. The event slides, that's something that I want done by the end of the week, but it's not a pillar. So sometimes there's things in your business where you know they're proactive and you have to use focus and mental energy and they're an important part of what you're doing, but they're not necessarily a pillar. And so anything beside pillars I need to work on or want to work on that week, I also put in the left column. So that's how I plan my week. Now that middle column, what I simply use this middle column for is, look, my number one distraction, this is for me personally, I'm real good at not checking email all the time at this point. I'm real good at not being distracted by incoming phone calls. I let them go to voicemail. Where I get the most distracted is my own head, meaning I'm constantly thinking of ideas, having ideas. And what I used to do many years ago was I'd have a good idea and that would take me down the rabbit hole, right? And so what I started doing was I keep this huge section in the middle of my weekly index card, and anything that pops into my head, any ideas I have, I simply write them down, and I'm going to show you in a little bit here what that looks like, but I simply write them down and any notes I have with them, and that's it. It's designed for nothing but to just get it out of my head, right? Now this is obviously, you see this at the beginning of the week because nothing's checked off, there's nothing in the middle, but I just want to get this stuff out of my head. That is the key right there. And so by doing that, here's what happens. When I go to create my index card the next week, it's crazy, but you always think your ideas, because they're novel, new, or you just read about them, you think they're these great ideas or these things you should do. By the time I've kind of had a week to sit on it, I would say about 80% of the stuff that winds up in this middle column, and then sometimes on the back of my index card if it's a real busy week of thinking, is 80% of them I just cross off. And it's not because they're not good ideas. It's more because I just know I'm either not going to do them or it's not worth the time to do them, right? There's too much opportunity cost. And so the ones that do survive, the 20% that do survive, I have reference documents for them, and you'll see those in that module. But I have reference documents where I can put ideas for creating content, ideas for marketing, ideas for different projects I'm working on. So I simply transpose or transfer all those over to those reference documents, and then I start with a clean slate the following week. And what this looks like is this, and I just ripped this from the week before because it was the start of a new week when I took those pictures. But this just happened to be from the week before, and it's a whole bunch of notes to myself and things like that. And I know for a fact I went through this, and a few of them made it, and a few of them didn't. And so be it, but I just fill this thing up. Just get it out of your head. Now, again, that's just my system. I need a place to get things out of my head, but I also want to make sure I don't lose any good ideas that I have. Okay, so let's talk about planning your day. All right, let's talk about planning your day. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at a legal pad. Now, it's just the top of the legal pad. I cut it off in this picture so I could zoom in, but I use a full legal pad, and the bottom is often used during the day for notes and other things. But this legal pad is just the kind you buy at your office supply store, right? Nothing fancy. The way I set my day up on the legal pad, and again, you can use something else, but the very first thing I do in the morning is I put out what I call my visual calendar, meaning I look at my calendar and any calls or appointments I have for the day, I simply put into that left margin. So it says, 10 a.m., Russ Pillar Group, and I have a little 60 there. That means it's an hour meeting or an hour phone call, right? And if I don't have a 60, that just means it's a half hour. So at 10 a.m. I have that. At 11 a.m., I have a call with Jim A., one of my clients. Then I have 3 hours in between, and that's the spacing I like to use. Is each line kind of for spaces represents an hour. If I have to, I'll just put a dark line in between. If I have a half-hour break, it really doesn't matter. Whatever you like. But then I have a space in the middle of the day, and then at 3 p.m. I have another Russ Pillar call. Okay, that's another 60 minutes on the phone. And then at 4 p.m. I have a call with A and J. All right, and then I actually just added something, but it's too late for this picture. Anyway, so this is just for me. This is my visual of the day. I don't want to have to keep looking back at my calendar. I don't want to wait for notifications. And the reason they're in yellow, kind of like before, is that they have to be done at a certain time, right? At or by a certain time. In this case, they have to be done at the scheduled times. Okay, so that's my visual calendar for the day. Then if you look at the main part of the legal pad, what you'll see is I've broken it up into 3 columns. The right column is my personal to-do list. Okay, this is my personal to-do list. And, some people say, well, when you're working during the day, why do you do personal things, or why do you have a personal to-do list? And the reality is I don't usually do much personal stuff during the day. Some, like everyone, but not much. The reason I have it here, similar to the index card, is that it gets it out of my head. Meaning, I'll put a few things there so they're out of my head. I don't want to feel like I have to remember to do them later after I'm done working for the day. But also, as my day goes on, a lot of times, things, I get a text from my wife or something happens and I add to the list. And again, it just gets it out of my head. I want to keep my mental bandwidth maximized. I want to stay focused. So that's the right column. And it's the same rule in the right column as it is in the middle column. You're going to hear in a little bit where, if something is in orange, that just means it has to be done by the end of the day or there's a consequence. On this particular day, I didn't have anything that needed to be in orange over there. Okay. Let's spend some time on the middle column. All right. The middle column here, the one that says NLW call date to begin with, this is my business to-do list. All right. These are what I refer to, my terminology, as tasks. Okay. And let me define what I mean by a task. A task to me is something, that takes, about, and it's not an exact science, but if I can do it in 10 minutes or less, 12 minutes, 15 minutes or less, I consider that a task. But also, these are also things that require little mental energy. So some things on here may take me 30 minutes or 40 minutes, but I don't need mental energy. I can do them at the end of the day. I'm not going to use them for max time. So, for example, I have one here that says, JB interview notes, okay? I know those interview notes are going to take me about a half hour, but I really there's not much mental energy in them at all. I just have to run down a few pieces of paper and go check, 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 and then enter those checks into another sheet, clean it up, and print it out. So to me, that just doesn't require, in this case, much mental energy because of what it involves for me personally. If it did require mental energy, it'd be in a different column. We'll talk about that in a second. All right. So these are my tasks, all right, my business tasks, and these come from 4 places, all right? The first place they come from is the day before. I often, especially when the list is longer, I often don't finish these tasks. These are not priorities to me for the most part. Unless it's in orange, these tend to be the insignificant things, right, for the most part. So a lot of times there's stuff left over from the day before. The second place they come from is from the weekly index card. When I'm planning my day, I look at the weekly index card and I say, is there anything on here that I feel I want to attack today? That would go in that column. The third place they come from is from my morning email. So I do check my email in the morning, right? It's one of the first things I do. And I actually check it before I plan my day because it gives me information about planning my day a lot of times, right? Sometimes I haven't checked it, there's a couple of hours from the day before and maybe some things from that morning. So the AM email, and obviously like in the email, if something can be dealt with right away, I deal with it right away, I respond, but mostly I you just write it on this list. Now, the other thing is I'll often, well, okay, so let me say it this way. Let me articulate it a little differently. The fourth place that this list comes from is as my day goes on, a lot of times the day itself generates tasks. So, for example, if I'm working on something and I realize by working on something I have to do something else, or if I'm on a phone call with someone and I tell them I'm going to send them something, I might write it there. So, as you know, things you do during the day generate tasks. So that you're looking at this basically toward the beginning. This was written toward the beginning of a day. By the end of the day, this one, multiple things could be added, crossed off, all that kind of stuff. You'll also notice that there's little check marks next to some of them. So the system I use, obviously if something is done, I cross it off. But a lot of times there are things that we have to do that they're not really completed because once we do them, we're waiting on somebody else, right? So for example, on here it says, Kim G update, right? I'm waiting for an update from Kim. So I reached out to her, asked her for an update, hit check because I did my part, but it's not done because I'm waiting on her response. These are the little tasks that I tend to do earlier in the day. If I feel like I'm going to need a response to get it done, I'll try to knock those out right away early in the day. It usually takes me 5 or 10 minutes because it's usually just a matter of shooting off emails and letting them be out there. Okay, so that's the 4 places these tasks come from. Now, when do I attack these tasks? Well, again, I told you at the beginning of the day, if they require a response, I'll spend a few minutes after I finish planning for the day, and I'll say, are there any of these I want to just shoot off real quick, waiting for a response? The other time is once in a while, I will finish, something in the left column, which we're going to talk about, one of my priorities, or maybe I have a few minutes before I want to take a break, or maybe there's a few minutes before my next call, and I really don't want to start something new, so sometimes I'll take those 7 or 8 loose minutes and, maybe attack 1 or 2 things on that to-do list in the middle. But the majority of these tasks for me are done either at the end of the day, okay, because again, these are lower mental energy things. So in the case of the day you're looking at here, last call 4 p.m. should be over at 4:30. At that point, I can tell you right now, mentally, I'm just not gonna be in a great place energy-wise, right? And so I might take from 4:30 to 5:30 or however long it takes me and run down this list and just kind of use that last hour of the day to knock out as many of these things as I can, all right? The other way I get a lot of them done is if this thing gets really big, right? It's a really long list and it's starting to get to the point where it's kind of overwhelming me a little bit where I'm like, all right, I got to start attacking some of this stuff. This list is getting too long. I will use what I call in the book flash hours, meaning I'll actually budget in the left column, right? One of my priorities for the day, the next thing we talk about, I'll actually put one of my priorities as a flash hour. So maybe the third most important thing I do that day is a flash hour, meaning I simply set a timer for 60 minutes and I just start attacking these tasks. Listen, it's amazing and you might hear me say this in other modules, but it is amazing what you can get done in 60 concentrated minutes, right? When you really batch things. I believe we overestimate what we can do in a day because we're like, oh, I got the whole day ahead of me, or what we can do in a week, I got the whole week ahead of me. We tend to overestimate that, but we tend to underestimate what we can do in a concentrated hour. And so I use these flash hours to knock out a bunch of these things, all right? So now let's jump over to the most important column in all of this, right? And this is the left column, what I call my priority column, or sometimes I refer to it as my project column, but priorities are projects. And let me define what I mean by priorities or projects. And these are the things that require me to be proactive, right? There's no consequence for not doing them. They're proactive, significant things, but they require a certain amount of mental energy, certain level of concentration, certain level of focus to get them done. And so this is what I mean by my priorities or my projects. And so sometimes these things don't take a long time, but they do take focus. All right. And these are not only pillars. Some of these are pillars and some of them not. In this case of this day we're looking at here, the first two happen to be pillars. The third one is not a pillar. It's one of the things I told you previously that I wanted to attack. So here's how I decide on my priorities. It's pretty simple. I simply say, look, and I really do go through this mental exercise every day, and the better you get at this, the more productive you'll be. But I ask myself, look, if I can only get one proactive thing done today, if I can only get one thing done today, and then after that, my whole day is going to fall apart, right? My roof's going to leak. My kids have to get picked up from school. The whole day just goes sideways. What is the most important thing? What am I going to be, not what do I feel like doing, but what am I going to be glad tonight is completed, right? What am I going to be feel the most proud of, glad it's done? And then I simply ask myself, if I can get 2 things done today, if I can get 3 things, right? I rarely for a day get more than 6 of these priorities in. It really depends on how many calls I have, things like that. But, and in the case of this day, what I always do, well, actually every day, I always put one more thing, all right? I always put one more thing than I think I can realistically do. So when I planned this particular day, my first one was work on my product for 2 hours, all right? The second one was working on my prospecting and messaging for 2 hours. Now, again, I have reference documents for these, so when it's time to do that, work on my prospecting and messaging, I open up my Excel sheet and, where am I at with my prospecting and messaging? What's the next thing to do? So on and so forth. I feel like number 1 there and number 2 are the only things that I could realistically get done. The reason I always put a stretch on there is because, sometimes you just do have a good day and you don't want to think about all of a sudden you have time and you got to figure out then what to do. But usually the reason I do it, the more realistic reason is sometimes things get canceled. If all of a sudden my 3 p.m. gets canceled, my 4 p.m. gets canceled, all of a sudden that's not the time to just, because here's what most people will do. Oh, I'll just check my email, right? And I'll look for instructions from someone else on what to do next. So that's why I usually put a stretch in there in case something that I'm planning on doing gets canceled, or, for example, something happens with number 1 or number 2, and all of a sudden I really can't work on it that day. So I always put in that extra thing. And now when you're looking at this, if you understand how I run my day, from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock every day is my time, right? 7 to 10, that is when I'm proactive working on this left column, right? Doing things important to me like working out and working on my priorities. That is my time. My day, I do my most important work usually before 10 o'clock. That's what I budget to hit my pillars and do those things. So if you look at the calculations here, you go, okay, Brian, you got 3 hours from 7 to 10. Then you have another 3 hours between your sets of calls, right? That's 6 hours of time. The first and second thing here only take 4 hours. Why do you only feel like you can get those 2 things done? And the reality is, although the calculations may seem like that, number 1, I take a lot of breaks. I'm a huge fan of focusing for a certain amount of time, then taking a break. Focus, take breaks, right? The other thing is, I know for a fact on this day, I worked out in the morning. I consider working out part of my business. And so if I'm working out that day, it's happening usually between 7 and 10. And I consider that as much a part of my business as anything else. And so between the breaks and working out, and to be honest, sometimes I hit mental walls. I need more break than I thought, things like that. Having lunch, getting coffee, whatever it is, it's amazing how long 2 hours of actual work can take, because I literally set a timer and I start counting down, and when I take a break, I stop it. Or if I have to get distracted, I stop it. Or something important happens, I stop it, and then I start it again. So when I say 2 hours of product, 2 hours PM, I mean 2 working hours. I don't just say, okay, from 8 to 10, I'm going to do this, right? And so maybe I'll get to the event slides, maybe I won't, right, on that particular day. Okay, so as far as a rule, the last thing you want to know about when it comes to this left column is very simple. And I explain this the same way I would explain it to a third grader because it's not easy. Believe me, it's not easy, but it is simple. The rule is very simple that you cannot start the second thing till you're done the first. You cannot start the third thing till you're done the second. If you have more things, you can't start the fourth thing till you're done the third. Even if you get distracted and things happen and you procrastinate and it takes you way longer to get something done than you thought, you still keep coming back to that that priority until it's done. All right. So, one of the CAP strategies that are in the book and that you'll learn about, look, sometimes it's hard to get started, and that's okay. The rule is, look, if you're not working on the next thing or the thing you're supposed to be working on, then you're not working on anything. That's the rule. And so what I tell people is, look, if you can't get started, if you're really just mentally not there, that's when you got to use the CAP strategy of changing your mood. Okay? So if that means listening to a training for 15 minutes or calling someone who kind of gets you energized or going for a walk or whatever you have to do that I talk about with that CAP strategy, right? I'd rather, look, if I have to do something, I'd rather listen to a training of someone who kind of gets me where I need to be in terms of wanting to get to work. I'd rather take 15, 20 minutes, listen to that, and then hit it, right? Then get after it, then just try to drag myself through it. But you cannot start the second thing till you're done the first. It's a very simple way to do it. I always recommend, if it's timed, use a timer. I think you'll find it's the best productivity tool on the market. Not your phone, but like an actual kitchen timer, right? And the way you want to think about your day is, it's as one of my former coaches used to call it, working with a relaxed intensity, right? Being very slow, methodical, but focused and intense, right? Not all over the place, not flying by the seat of your pants, not having 19 things out at a time. Work on the first thing, crush it, be done, take a break, second thing, so on and so forth. I mean, here's the reality, and this is where I'll start wrapping up, but, this idea of, I got to get back on track, you can't get back on track if you don't have an actual track, right? I mean, I know that sounds kind of funny, but when people say get back on track, I'm like, what track are you on? Because you should know exactly where to pick up, right? If I get disrupted or it's a personal thing, I may not feel like doing what's next or what I'm in the middle of, but I'm very clear about what it is at that point. And I'll be honest, sometimes if a day gets away from me and I wind up scribbling and crossing out and this happens and that happens, I will stop in the middle of my day and I will take another 15 minutes or whatever it takes and essentially replan my day. Even if it's like noon and, the day's more than halfway done, just by getting that focus and replanning my day and starting with a clean legal pad, I'm way more productive in the time after that. Now, if you're listening to this and you are like a traveling person where you travel a lot or you're in the field for sales, yes, you should be planning those days as well. Those things are, and again, look, you might only have one priority for that day because you're spending most of the day in meetings. But maybe you write 2 priorities down because maybe meetings cancel, right? Things start late. You wind up with time you didn't think you were going to have. You get back to your hotel room and, you got back earlier than you thought and you do have some energy. Don't just check your email. So yes, I think you should plan your day. If it's a field day or a travel day, it'll, just won't have as much there, right? Okay, so that's it on planning your day, planning your week. I hope you got a lot out of that. I hope it's something you take seriously. Again, whether you use my system or some other system or parts of a system, look, it's an open secret to success. I always say there's 2 of them: control your mornings and plan your week, plan your day.